Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Frank Macaluso, and today we're going to be doing another episode of the E30 N54 behind me. We're going to be chipping away at some of the items in the engine bay. We're going to be taking a look at the windshield wiper reservoir and getting that installed in an incognito place. And we're going to be starting to route the battery cable as well as other small things as well in today's episode. Guys, you don't want to miss it. This is going to be a good one. So you can see the subframe is completely done. It has been painted with the Pour 15 silver paint. It is tough, man. You cannot get through this. This is good paint. It's a good subframe. It is strong and it ain't going anywhere. Everything is basically welded up to my liking. I do need to continue to do some Bondo or polyurethane filler to smooth out all these items here that I had to drill out the spot welds. After we do that, we're going to work on the windshield wiper reservoir, which is going to be hidden right under here. And then we're going to start routing the battery cable through from the trunk, mounting the battery in the trunk and routing the cable all the way through into the electronics box through the existing hole that was already there between there and the firewall. So we got a lot of good stuff today, guys, a lot of niche type stuff, and I think it's going to be a lot of cool problem solving type things we're going to be going through one by one, and I think you're going to enjoy it, guys, so stand by. Okay, while that dries, let's take a look. This is actually pretty cool. This is called R&E tack paper, and basically when you finish doing your thing, you just basically peel the paper off. And I got a brand new piece of paper here that you can use. And it's thick paper, right? It's thick. It's used to actually, this is what it's for. They're called clean sheets. CS100 by R&E Paint Supply. I think they're really, you won't find too much on this if you Google it, but you gotta really go to their website and figure it out, and you can buy them from them. Really good value, like that. Anyway, so I did my Bondo, and I put the Bondo on, and I'm just gonna let it dry. While we're doing that, and letting that dry, I wanted to focus on the windshield wiper. Now, I have an aftermarket reservoir. Why? Because I want to put the reservoir in a concealed location. And this is the bracket for it. I actually added this hardware. The bracket actually installs right under here. Actually, I think it goes like this, right? Just like this. The screws are actually too long. But the bracket goes in here, and then the actual reservoir mounts inside of right here. The goal is going to end up being to get it right installed right under here, just like this. Okay, so it's going to end up going in there. The bracket is going to end up being on the back side, just like this right there, and then I'm going to weld it to the bottom here. So this is actually going to be concealed with a hole drilled right at the top here for the blue cap. So all you're going to see here is just a blue cap, which is pretty neat. So this whole area is going to be completely open and free, much like this area is going to be completely open and free, with exception to the charge pipe is going to be right there. The charge pipe here is going to come up and then go over, but that's the only thing that you're going to see here. Remember, power steering and cooling tubing and reservoirs are going to be inside the intake manifold. So all that's going to be basically concealed. It's going to be a pretty slick setup. So I want to get this thing installed. I want to weld in the bracket, and I don't need to do any plumbing or wiring yet, but I do want to get it installed. So before we start in with the actual installation into the car, I want to work on this bracket, right? So this bracket's got a couple of M10 bolts that I installed, right? I got to unscrew them, and basically the nuts float freely. The idea is that this guy slips inside of this channel, and these nuts, I want them to be captive nuts that remain inside this black panel, because the only way to remove it then is to remove these bolts, and then the whole assembly can slide off of the welded bracket on the actual chassis. So how do you get these flange nuts to be remain captive inside of this black bracket? Well, best way to do it is to use the Q-bond. I use it for a lot of things, and the fact that this is not structural makes this perfectly permissible to do. All you want to do is you want to add some of the black dust inside of here. All right, get it into the little crevices, and then you have your super glue. Add a couple of dots of that. All right, so free that up. And we're gonna add a little bit. Ooh, a little too much. Whoops. That is, I think, okay. Now I'm gonna have to pour it out, but I don't think it's going anywhere. Okay. So now, at least with this guy here, I've got a nut that's set in place. Gotta get the glue off, but I think it should be in good shape. Now we gotta do the other one too. So it doesn't have to look pretty, but it needs to be strong. It needs to hold. And I think that this is gonna hold pretty well. So I have my 2 nuts here. And now, if you slide it in just like that, you'll see that the nuts will go right like that, and the bracket on the actual car will screw right onto the bracket, and the backside will go right into those nut holes. Nut holes. So let's install the bracket onto the chassis, and then we can get this thing mock fitted. Install our hole for the top, and the top will end up going right on top there like that. So I've got the bracket installed, I got the nuts there, and if I just kind of loosely install with my fingers, you'll see that the bracket fits just like that. And I have it positioned in such a way that this end of the bracket is perfectly level with this face. And the reason is because this is where I'm going to end up welding to the actual chassis, and I want this part to be sticking above where that is. That way, all that's creeping through is just the lid. So I think I've got this exactly where I want it. So let's install it and tack it in and see. We actually have to drill the hole here. I know exactly where the hole is going to go in the chassis, and then we can weld. So as you can see, I actually moved it over here to this corner as opposed to being here. The reason I moved it is because I didn't want it to interfere with the wheel, right? And where the wheel would end up turning in. So I made some brackets here and got it situated exactly where I want it. And and this is exactly how I want it to work, right? You basically open it up, fill it up, and then push it closed. And this is really, really streamlined. When everything's painted the same color, it'll look a lot better. But now that that's done, now we can take a look and figure out how to take the battery cable and fish it from the back of the car all the way to the front. So let's take a look and work on that now. Okay, so next is the battery installation and the wiring. We got to snake this long, I believe it's a 2-gauge wire all the way around from the back all the way to the front. I got a battery tray, I got battery hold downs, and I have a positive and negative terminal, which I'm going to end up putting inside of the electronics bay. And of course, I got my ground wire. So let's take a quick look at the battery tray and figure out how to install it in the location in the back by the trunk. So here is the compartment where the battery is usually located on most E30s. You open it up, it folds down, and you'll see that there is plenty of room to put a battery. The battery bracket has been welded in. It is stainless steel. I have a seam sealer around the edges of the welds that go down to the bottom. And I have it positioned in such a way that this tray that the battery itself will sit in will be nice and centered, such that we can then take these guys, we can put them on, we can put the battery in, and then we can start doing our cabling. So let's get the battery in, let's get the tray in, and let's see how our cabling is going to end up getting snaked around the front. So I got my ground cable basically laid out from the negative terminal of the battery right down there, and it's going to go up and snake around, and it's going to go right to this location, which is a ground point on the frame. Now, the ground cable that I got with the kit was way longer than I needed. So what I decided to do was cut the 4-gauge wire, and I'm going to use a butt splice connector right here. I need to cut off some of the insulation, and I need to use high heavy-duty crimpers in order to get this thing crimped onto the wire. So let me show you how I do that. So this is the crimping tool that I use. It's called a Hycat hydraulic crimping tool. This is what it looks like. It's got a whole bunch of different die sizes in it. The die sizes are all corresponding to what size of a crimp you're looking to use, what your gauge of your wire is. And here we have a 4-gauge wire, and I have a 4-gauge butt splice. And the idea is that you take the heat shrink first. Always put the heat shrink above first. Leave that on there for later. And we take the butt splice connector and we stuff it inside of the strands. Got to cut off a couple of those extra strands. And then this is a hydraulic crimping tool, so you basically continue to pump it and it basically closes in on the wire. So let's try to demonstrate this here for you. There was a, oh yeah, there's a on and off. So if we do on, I believe that allows off, maybe? Yes, it's off. Off means crimp. Okay. Let's see how far I can get here with this. And now you just push it until the two halves are nearly touching. I believe that is pretty good. And then you go on and it relieves the stress and you have a really nice crimp here. I gotta clip off a couple of the extra strands. Then you put the heat shielding over, or the shrink sleeving over, and then you heat it all up with like a master appliance, you know, kind of. Okay. So let's go through and finish that right now in a quick time lapse. So there we go, the ground cable is installed, it is secured to the frame, and it is on the battery. Now the battery is just kind of loose there, but for demonstration purposes, I didn't want to lose an opportunity to show you how to crimp these cables if you have to shorten them. It's really not that hard or expensive. I mean, that one crimper was only like 60 or 70 bucks, included all the different sizes, so it was really good. And I'm almost sure we'll end up having to do it on the positive side. So we need to snake this positive side around, get into the box, and the battery electronics box in the front, and let's just see how long it is and how much we're going to need to trim out. So the battery cable, positive battery cable, is now snuck through the access hole, and I'm going to stop there. I've got a couple of terminals here for positive and negative, and these guys are going to end up getting installed here as well for all power distribution from the engine and of course from the fuse box over so that I can supply power to the car itself. Now that that's done, we're going to be doing a lot more of the wiring in the electronics section in the next couple of weeks as we start to attempt to do our first start. Until then, we're going to be working on fuel. And here's our 5-bar regulator from an E36 M3. Comes with a filter, but I took the filter off. This is an M12 by 1.5 thread, which is the exact same thread as your lug bolts, actually. The filter is already installed back there, so I don't need another filter. So I'm going to be using an AN4 fitting to a M12 by 1.5. that's going to adapt this. Clever little setup. It's going to be installed right over here. And the fuel return is going to be this guy here, this 90 degree. And then this guy right here goes directly to the high pressure fuel pump on the N54. So I'm going to work on figuring out a method to install this thing and have it sit right in this little cubby area right next to the rear brake regulator. So anyway, let's work on that right now and move forward on this. All right, guys, so I got it installed here, and you can see that it's a little loose. No big deal. That's what I wanted. I wanted it to be a little loose because after I paint everything and smooth everything out, then I want to put foam on the inside of this bracket so that it actually holds it really nice and snugly, and there's no metal or very little metal-to-metal contact. So this is perfect. Your fuel supply is going to go into this AN fitting. It's going to go into this M12. It's going to come out down here, back to these very conveniently located lines. And then from here, it's going to go right as a fuel send right to the N54 high pressure fuel pump. So guys, this is perfect. Exactly what I wanted. It's not exactly in the location I wanted, but these lines actually kind of dictated that I couldn't really put it inside of this little cubby because then I wouldn't really have any place to sneak the lines out. So I felt like this was probably the best place to do it. It really still is out of the way, but it's accessible enough to service if you ever wanted to service it or replace it. So I am tired. I'm in an engine bay, and I am just about ready to quit for the day. We did a lot, and I'm very happy with the progress that we've made, and I'm looking forward to doing more low pressure fuel pump in the next video. We'll be doing some other cool stuff too, and prepping this engine bay for final installation and paint. Guys, my name is Frank Macalusa from Garageaholic. Thanks a lot for following this E30 N54 swap. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Leave me a thumbs up if you like the content, and please, of course, tell your friends about what I'm doing. I'm gonna be posting stuff on the forums. This is gonna start getting very exciting soon, come the end of April and beginning of May, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys. So thank you so much for coming up and coming out and enjoying the video and blah, 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 blah. Thanks a lot, guys. I am out of here. Take it easy.